Alright. So... What the hell? Okay, whatever. Alright, so I am going to record a bunch of small videos about Gognio. Kind of how I structured it in GameMaker, some of the scripts and how they work. Most of it is... It's a bit messy. I tried to do commenting as much as I thought would be helpful to myself. And I don't know how digestible it is for other people. I also am no expert in coding or structuring any of this stuff, so I don't know what the standards are, and I'm pretty sure I didn't meet any of them. So just not to self-deprecate too much, but it is kind of weird. Also, a disclaimer in learning GameMaker and trying to figure it out, it seems to me that it is possibly the worst engine for creating a roguelike. It's just not meant to do things like this. It's meant for real-time games. So there's issues with slowness in certain ways that I've been able to work around by kind of like minimizing the amount of checks I'm doing and things like that. But if you know another language, it might be easier, honestly. If you're an actual coder as well, that's definitely not my strong suit. It might be easier to do it in a different language or something like that. The work that I've done on Gognio is something that other people have done in things like a week, and it took me like 8 months. So I don't know how much there is to recreate. So in any case, though, if you do want to continue working on it in GameMaker, or if you just want to get an idea of what the heck I was doing, we'll just start going. So I'm going to start with the overall structure of the game. So that's going to be just how GameMaker is treating everything. So I assume you haven't used GameMaker before, so I don't know why it's not capturing the whole window. Hold on. Whoa! Wrong display. Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll get... It's a little smaller, but now you can see everything. So, basically the way I'm using GameMaker is a way to manage resources. I don't use many of the built-in functions for drag and drop or anything like that. It's all kind of cobbled together from these things here. So this is basically a resource tree. Primarily what I'm using are sprites and scripts, and there's also one shader that I stole. Didn't steal, it's open source, whatever. I also put some sounds in here. These are the songs. Backgrounds, paths, fonts I kind of use, but backgrounds and paths I don't. Timelines I don't. Objects are kind of what execute the scripts. Rooms are where the objects are stored. And then included files are some text files. These are where all the special rooms get created. And then extensions is where the shader lives, and then the shader script lives in here. And then macros I don't use at all. I don't know what that is. So the basic idea is that when you run Gognio, like this, it's loading the very first room, and in that room is a controller object, and that object does basically everything. So I'm going to let it run here. There we go. So yeah, this is... If I show you the room, it's not going to look anything like this because there's nothing in it. Obviously, the game is controlled by numpad. When you step on stairs, you should get a dialog box, but sometimes it's invisible, so you just have to hit enter and make it go, and then the next time it will show up, which is stupid, but whatever. It's a debug dialog, it's fine. I don't want to ascend the stairs now. So, I've got some debug features built into this, so if you click on anywhere, it'll show you how many steps it would take to get to the player from that spot. Ooh, I need to close my second recorder. There we go. Stupid thing. So, if you click on this, it should say 2. This should say 3. This should say 999, because you can't get to there from within a wall, right? Easy enough. So that's kind of the idea. These guys right now are set to sort of a random AI, but there is a pathfinding AI. I just have it disabled. I can't remember how to re-enable that, but it's fine. So, we'll go ahead and quit out of here. I built in an if you hit escape, it closes. So when I show you the room, here's the room. It has nothing in it, right? is just got two objects. One of this is the CRT filter object, which runs the shader, and then this is the controller. You can see the names down here. That's the controller object. And so that's where all of the interesting stuff lives. So if we look at the objects, here's the controller. That's the right one, right? Yes. And this is basically what it does. So when you create it, it starts the script debug initiate, which is where I initiate some variables. It runs the setup for itself, and it sets alarm 0 to 1. What this does is 1 frame later, it then runs this piece of code, which centers the window. You have to, it's a weird workaround, it's a GameMaker thing. It has to do with the CRT filter. When you resize a window and then try to center it on the same frame, it doesn't. It centers it based on the old numbers, which is stupid, but, you know, so that's what that's doing. And then every step, so every frame, step is the same as frame, it's running a controller step script. And this basically executes everything else. Everything comes from this. And then it's also on a draw step. So basically your step happens, and then your draw steps happen as well. And you can only draw to the screen in draw steps. So this is where the console text is getting written. So every frame it does this, and every frame it does this. So that's kind of how it's structured. And so you can see in the scripts, I've got this sort of organized. So everything that the controller is doing is in here. So these aren't always consistently named. They almost always start with SCR so that they don't get confused with objects. But some of the time, the ones that I'm running initially will be init, and sometimes they'll be setup, as in this case. But I almost always do steps if it's running every step. So, and that's basically it. So what the steps thing is doing is it's running the turns. So every frame, it's checking to see, has the player done something that would push the turns forward. So the controller reads all of that. The player objects and the enemy objects really just monitor themselves. They don't really do a lot of work with checking things. The controller object does basically all of that. So the idea here is that it's checking to see whether or not we're going downstairs or upstairs. It's checking, actually I don't know what that is. Oh, it's checking whether or not the level changed. And then this is the cycle. So every step, it's subtracting 1 from the cycle. And the idea is that other objects or other scripts will set the cycle to greater than 0. Right now, really all that means is when I attack or when I move, the cycle is set to 1. And then when the cycle is 1, everything goes kabamo. Like, all of the enemies move or attack. Well, they don't attack. And all the other stuff is checked. So that's how it's all structured, this global cycle variable. So anytime you increase the global cycle by 1 or more, then you get a turn. So if you were to increase the cycle by 2, the enemies would get to take 2 turns. That way you can account for things like speed. In a way, right now enemies can't have their own speeds, just because it's all based on this global cycle, but you could have something that the player does that takes 2 actions. So if you wanted to, say, have a great sword or something, and every attack takes 2 actions, you would set the global cycle to 2. I think that's how that works. So a lot of this stuff are these global variables that are checking where we're at. So for instance, this player X check and player Y check is basically, am I trying to move? And you can see this is set in the script keyboard handler, so when something happens on the keyboard, something happens here. I don't know what this means. Oh, when you hit 5 on the numpad, it waits. So basically it just wastes a turn. Yep, that's basically it. So another thing is that I'm not only checking whether or not the player wants to move, I'm checking whether or not the player actually ends up moving. So I think no, that's not true though. That's what I think I intended to do, but never did it. So you can actually walk into walls, and that still takes a turn. So just FYI. So I mean, that's the basic idea. Everything happens starting here. There's also some enemy steps, if I'm not mistaken, so anytime... I'd have to look into it, I can't honestly remember. But yeah, it's sort of... most of the important stuff happens here. I think next what I'm going to talk about is dungeon generation, since that's the important part. So we'll stop this video, and then we'll move on to dungeon generation in the next video. I'm splitting these up into bite-sized pieces so that it works as a reference. So, you know, kind of if you have... if you want to re-watch a video about a certain subject, you're not skipping to somewhere in the middle of another video. So I'll put these all on YouTube in a big playlist with good names, and that way it'll be a little bit easier. So that's the overview. And yeah, I think I'll do a few more today and kind of give you, hopefully, a good head start on how it works. Okay, bye.